He spent days digging in the backyard and was mocked by everyone until he discovered what he had buried. Harold Thompson, at 70, had always been known in the small town of Woodstock as a man of few words and many secrets. That Tuesday morning, when he grabbed the old shovel from the back shed and started digging a hole in the backyard, no one imagined that this act would forever change the life of the entire family. Daniel watched his father from the kitchen window, incredulous. The man who always complained of back pain was now digging the earth with a determination he hadn't shown in years. With each shovel strike, clumps of dirt flew to the sides, forming a growing mound next to the hole that was beginning to take shape. "Dad, can you tell me what the hell you're doing?" Daniel left the house and approached, still wearing his uniform from the auto repair shop where he worked. Harold stopped for a moment, wiped the sweat from his brow with the back of his gloved hand, and stared at his son with those tired eyes that seemed to carry the weight of decades. "I need to find something I left here." "What thing, Dad? You never buried anything in this backyard." The old man resumed digging without answering. Daniel stood there watching his father work under the morning sun that was already growing hot. His calloused hands held the shovel firmly, but he noticed the pace was slower than in the past. "Dad, stop this. You're going to hurt yourself." "I won't stop until I find it." The determination in Harold's voice made Daniel take a few steps back. He knew that tone. It was the same one his father used when making definitive decisions in life, like when he sold the farm to move to the city, or when he refused to retire at 65. On the other side of the fence, Mrs. Margaret was hanging clothes on the line and didn't miss a single movement. The curious neighbor was already formulating theories about her neighbor's strange behavior. "Good morning, Harold. Doing some remodeling there." "Good morning, Mrs. Margaret." Nothing much. The man kept digging as if she weren't there. The woman stood there waiting for an explanation that didn't come. When she realized she would be ignored, she went back to her clothes, muttering softly about some people's lack of manners. Daniel tried once more to convince his father to stop, but Harold just shook his head and continued the work. The sun was already high when the son gave up and went to work, promising to return at lunchtime to check if the old man hadn't had some kind of breakdown. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. At 11 in the morning, when the heat was already unbearable, Harold finally took a break. The hole was already over 1/2 meter deep and almost 1 meter wide. His back ached. His hands were red even with the gloves, but something inside him kept him from giving up. Elizabeth, his wife of 42 years, appeared at the back door carrying a glass of ice water and a worried expression on her face. "Harold, for God's sake, what's happening to you?" He accepted the water and drank it all at once. Elizabeth watched her husband carefully. The grey hair under the blue cap was damp with sweat, his face red from effort and sun. The work shirt she herself had ironed the night before was now dirty with soil. "Are you going to tell me what you're looking for, or are you going to keep up this mystery?" "Elizabeth, trust me, I need to do this." "But why now? After all these years living here, why now have you decided to dig up the backyard?" Harold handed back the empty glass and picked up the shovel again. Elizabeth stood there watching her husband resume the work with the same obstinacy as before. She had known this man for over 4 decades and knew when it was useless to insist. But she also knew something very serious was happening for him to act that way. "At least come have lunch when Daniel arrives. I don't want you getting sick out there." Harold nodded his head without stopping digging. Elizabeth went back inside the house worried. She had never seen her husband so determined and at the same time so troubled. There was something in his eyes that she couldn't identify, a mix of urgency and fear that left her unsettled. When Daniel came back for lunch, he found his father still digging. The hole was much deeper now, and Harold had to bend down to keep excavating. His son was impressed with the progress, but also worried about his father's physical state. "Dad, stop. You're not young enough for this kind of effort anymore. I'm not finished yet." "Finished with what? What the hell did you bury there?" Harold stopped digging and looked at his son with an expression Daniel had never seen before. There was pain in those eyes, an old pain that seemed to be unearthed along with the dirt. "Some things are better left buried, son, but sometimes we don't have a choice." Don't have a choice about what. Dad, you're scaring me. The old man sighed deeply and leaned on the shovel. For a moment, Daniel thought his father would finally explain everything. But Harold just shook his head and went back to digging. During lunch, the family ate in silence. Elizabeth served the food, watching her husband, who barely touched his plate. Daniel tried to make conversation, but Harold answered only in monosyllables. The tension was palpable in the small kitchen of the simple house. "Dad, Mom is right to be worried. You've been acting very strange." "I'm not acting strange. I'm just doing what needs to be done." "But what needs to be done? Why can't you tell us? Why?" Harold got up from the table without finishing lunch and went back to the backyard. Elizabeth and Daniel exchanged glances, sharing the same concern. The behavior of the family patriarch was completely outside the norm. "Mom, do you think Dad is in his right mind? Your father has always been stubborn, Daniel, but this is different. I've never seen him like this." "Maybe we should call Dr. Richard." "And say what? That your father decided to dig a hole in the backyard? The doctor will think we're the crazy ones." Daniel knew his mother was right, but he couldn't feel at ease seeing his father in that state. He decided he would keep an eye on the situation and, if necessary, would take action. In the afternoon, some neighbors began to gather at the fence to watch the spectacle. Harold Thompson, the most reserved man on the street, digging a huge hole in his backyard without giving explanations to anyone. "Do you think he lost something valuable there?" speculated Mrs. Margaret to the other neighbors. "Or maybe he's looking for treasure," laughed Mr. Walter, the retiree from the Blue House. "Treasure, my foot." "The man has gone completely crazy," commented Mrs. Dorothy, always ready to think the worst of others. The laughter and mean-spirited comments reached Harold's ears, but he paid no attention at all. His mind was focused on something much more important than the neighbors' opinions, something that had tormented him for decades and that he had finally decided to face. By late afternoon, when Daniel returned from work, the hole was impressively deep. Harold was sweating heavily and breathing with difficulty, but he refused any help. "Dad, you're going to have a heart attack this way. At least let me help." "I don't need help. This is my business." "But why? What did you do there?" His son's question hit Harold like a punch. The old man stopped digging and stood motionless for a few seconds. Daniel noticed his father's hands trembling slightly as they held the shovel. "Son, some sins we carry our whole lives, and some have to be dug up to be forgiven." "What sins, Dad? What are you talking about?" But Harold had already gone back to digging, leaving his son even more confused and worried. That night, Elizabeth found her husband sitting on the edge of the bed, looking at his hands, bruised from the day's work. She approached carefully and sat beside him. "Harold, you need to tell me what's going on. I'm very worried." The man looked at his wife, and for the first time in decades, she saw tears in his eyes. Tears he quickly wiped away, as if he didn't want to show weakness. "Elizabeth, do you remember when we met?" "Of course I remember. You had just arrived in town. Said you came from the countryside." "I never told you why I left there." Elizabeth felt a chill in her stomach. In 42 years of marriage, Harold had always been very reserved about his past. She respected that, thinking it was just shyness or that there was nothing interesting to tell. "What did you do there, Harold?" "I did a lot of foolish things, Elizabeth. A lot of foolishness I've been carrying all these years." "But what kind of foolishness?" Harold fell silent for a long time. Elizabeth could hear her husband's heart beating fast. Finally, he sighed deeply. "Tomorrow you'll understand. When I find what I'm looking for, you'll understand everything." Elizabeth stayed up all night, wondering what her husband could have done in the past. She knew Harold as an honest, hard-working man who never harmed anyone. She couldn't imagine what kind of secret he had been carrying for so long. The next morning, Harold woke before sunrise and returned to the hole. His hands were sore and swollen, his back protested with every movement, but his determination remained unshaken. Daniel arrived for breakfast and found his mother crying in the kitchen. "Mom, what happened? Your father. He said he did something terrible in the past. Something that's buried in the backyard." "What kind of thing?" "I don't know, son. He wouldn't tell me. He said, 'Today I'll understand everything.' Daniel felt his blood run cold. What kind of terrible secret could his father have been hiding for so long? And what was buried in that backyard that was so important? "Mom, maybe you should stay at Aunt Catherine's house today." "I won't abandon your father now, Daniel. Whatever it is, we'll face it together." The neighbors arrived early to continue watching the spectacle. Harold's hole had become the main attraction on the street. Some people even brought chairs to sit and observe the work. "Look at the size of that hole," exclaimed Mrs. Margaret to anyone who would listen. "The man's been digging since yesterday morning." "I bet it's buried money," speculated Mr. Walter. "Rich folks always hide money at home." "Rich, Harold?" laughed Mrs. Dorothy. "The man barely has enough to get by." The speculations continued all morning, but Harold paid no attention. His mind was completely focused on the task. Every shovel strike brought him closer to the truth he had tried to forget for so many years. Around 10 in the morning, Harold's shovel hit something solid. The metallic sound echoed differently in the soft earth, making the old man's heart race dangerously. He stopped for a moment, breathing heavily, and looked up. Daniel was at the window watching. "Did you find something, Dad?" Harold didn't answer. He began to dig around the object more carefully, removing the dirt with his hands. Gradually, a dark wooden box began to appear. Daniel ran out of the house and arrived at the edge of the hole, panting. "What is that, Dad?" "It's what I came for." The box was the size of a shoebox, made of dark wood that had withstood the year's underground well. Harold held it carefully, as if it were something very fragile or very dangerous. "Dad, open that box. I'm dying of curiosity." But Harold shook his head. "Not here. Let's go inside." Elizabeth was waiting in the living room, visibly nervous. When she saw her husband entering with the dirt-covered box, she felt her legs go weak. Harold placed the box on the living room table and stared at it for a long time. "Harold, for God's sake, open that box." Elizabeth was on the verge of a nervous breakdown. With trembling hands, Harold opened the lid of the box. Inside were some yellowed photographs, letters tied with a faded red ribbon, and a small cloth-wrapped parcel. Daniel picked up one of the photographs. It was of a young man who looked like his father, next to a pretty girl he didn't know. Both were smiling at the camera on a sunny day. "Who is this girl, Dad?" Harold took the photograph from his son's hands very carefully. "That's Catherine Sullivan." Elizabeth felt her heart stop. The name sounded familiar, but she couldn't remember from where. "Who is Catherine Sullivan, Harold?" The old man sat down heavily in the chair and held the photograph against his chest. Catherine was the woman I loved before I met you, Elizabeth." The silence that followed was deafening. Elizabeth and Daniel looked at each other, trying to process the information. Harold had never mentioned any previous relationship. "And why did you never tell me this?" Elizabeth asked, trying to keep her voice calm. "Because I did a terrible thing to her, something that haunts me to this day." Daniel picked up the letters from the box and began to read. They were love letters written by this Catherine to his father. Letters full of promises of eternal love and plans for the future. "Dad, these letters are beautiful. She really loved you." Harold nodded, but the tears streaming down his face were not of joy. "I loved her too, more than anything in life." "Then why did you break up?" Elizabeth asked, though part of her didn't want to know the answer. "Because I was a coward, Elizabeth. A coward who destroyed the life of the person I loved most in the world." Harold picked up the cloth-wrapped parcel and opened it carefully. Inside was a simple but pretty engagement ring. "I asked Catherine to marry me in 1978. She said yes. We were very young, but we were very much in love." Daniel continued flipping through the photographs. He saw his father and Catherine in various happy moments, at parties, on outings, always holding hands and smiling. "What happened, Dad? Why didn't you marry her?" Harold stood up and went to the window. He stared at the hole he had dug as if the answer were there. "What happened was that I met your mother." Elizabeth felt as if she had been slapped in the face. The revelation hit her like a bolt of lightning, making everything make sense suddenly. "Did you cheat on me with her, Harold?" "No, Elizabeth, I cheated on her with you." The difference in the words completely changed the weight of the situation. Elizabeth realized she wasn't the other woman in the story. She was the intruder who had destroyed a relationship. Harold, I didn't know. You never told me you were engaged. I know, Elizabeth. It was all my fault. You didn't know anything. Daniel was trying to fit the pieces of the story together. His parents met in 1979 and married the same year. If his father was engaged to someone else. Dad, did you leave Catherine to be with Mum? Worse than that, son. I left her without any explanation. Catherine was waiting for me at the church on our wedding day, and I didn't show up. The horror of the revelation left the whole family in shock. Elizabeth covered her face with her hands. Daniel was open-mouthed, and Harold kept looking out the window, reliving the worst decision of his life. You left her standing at the altar? Elizabeth asked, incredulous. I did, and I never went back to give her an explanation. I left town and never looked back. But why? Why did you do that to her? Harold turned to his family, his face marked by decades of regret. Because I was young and stupid. Because I thought I was in love with you, Elizabeth. Because I thought I could just start a new life and forget the past. And did you succeed? Elizabeth asked, though she already knew the answer. Never, not a single day. Catherine was always here. Harold tapped his chest, reminding me of what I did, of how much pain I caused. Daniel picked up a few more letters from the box. These were different from the others. They were letters Catherine had sent after the wedding that never happened, letters full of despair, confusion, and pain. Dad, she wrote to you afterward. She wanted to understand what had happened. I know. I received all these letters before I left town, but I never had the courage to reply. Elizabeth abruptly rose from her chair. 42 years, Harold. 42 years of marriage, and you never told me this. Elizabeth, please, don't ask me to be calm. I just found out our marriage began with a horrible betrayal. That you abandoned a woman who loved you at the altar to be with me. But I love you too, Elizabeth. I've always loved you. Loved me. Or did you just settle for me because you didn't have the courage to face what you did to her? His wife's question hit Harold squarely. It was a question he had asked himself for decades and had never been able to answer with certainty. I don't know, Elizabeth. I really don't know. The brutal honesty of the answer made Elizabeth collapse onto the sofa in tears. Daniel was torn between comforting his mother and trying to understand his father. Dad, why did you decide to tell this now? Why dig all this up? Harold went back to the table where the box was and picked up the last letter from the pile. It was a letter different from the others, with a more recent postmark. Because I received this last week. He handed the letter to Daniel, who read it aloud. Harold, I heard through acquaintances that you live in Woodstock. My name is Gregory Sullivan. I am Catherine's brother. She passed away last month, but before that, she left a letter for you. She said it was important for you to know the truth about what happened after you left. I will be in Woodstock next week. I hope you have the courage to meet me this time. Gregory. The silence that followed was absolute. Elizabeth stopped crying and looked at her husband with an expression of terror. Her brother is coming here. He already came. He arrived yesterday. He's staying at the inn downtown. And you didn't tell me? Elizabeth was incredulous. How could I tell you without explaining the whole story? Daniel folded the letter and placed it back on the table. Dad, what else did Catherine write in that letter she left? I don't know, son. Gregory said he'll only give it to me in person. And are you going to meet him? Harold looked at his family, torn between the desire to finally know the truth and the fear of the consequences. I have to go, don't I? After all these years, Catherine deserves that I at least hear what she had to tell me. Elizabeth stood up again, this time with a different determination in her voice. Then we're going together. Elizabeth, you don't need to... Yes, I do, Harold. If I'm going to find out I've lived 42 years of a lie, I'd rather know the whole truth at once. Daniel supported his mother's decision. I'm going too. We're a family, and families face problems together. Harold was moved by his family's support, despite the whole situation. Perhaps he didn't deserve it, but he was grateful not to have to face it alone. All right, I'll call the inn and arrange a meeting with Gregory. While Harold made the call, Elizabeth and Daniel kept looking at the photographs of Catherine. It was impossible not to notice how beautiful she was. and how genuinely happy she seemed next to Harold. "Mum, how do you feel knowing all this?" "I don't know, son. I'm confused, hurt, but also curious. I want to know what happened to her after your father left. Do you think you can forgive Dad?" Elizabeth took a long time to answer. She looked at her husband, who was on the phone, visibly nervous, and tried to separate the anger from the pain. 42 years, Daniel. 42 years beside a man I thought I knew completely. I don't know if I can forgive, not the betrayal itself, but the decades of lies. But Dad is a good man, Mother. You know that. I do. And that's what hurts me the most, knowing that the man I love was capable of causing so much suffering to another person. Harold returned to the living room with a tense expression. "Gregory will meet us this afternoon at 3 o'clock in the little square downtown. He said he prefers a public place." "Did he sound like he did on the phone?" Elizabeth asked. "Calm, but determined. He said he waited his whole life for this moment." Daniel looked at his watch. It was already past noon. In a few hours, they would discover the rest of the story that had changed so many lives. "Father, do you have any idea what Catherine might have written in that letter?" "I'm afraid to imagine, son. After what I did to her." Harold couldn't finish the sentence. Decades of guilt weighed on his shoulders like a giant burden. Lunch was tense and silent. None of the three could eat properly, all lost in thoughts about what was to come. Elizabeth looked at her husband, trying to recognize in him the young man from the photographs who had been capable of such great cruelty. At 2:30, the Thompson family left their house heading downtown. Harold drove in silence. Elizabeth sat in the passenger seat looking out the window, and Daniel in the back seat watching his parents. The little square in the center of Woodstock was small and quiet. There were a few benches under the trees and a playground where some children were playing. Gregory Sullivan was sitting on one of the benches, holding an envelope in one hand. When he saw Harold approaching, Gregory stood up. He was a man of about 60, with greying hair and an elegant bearing. There was a dignity in his posture that impressed the family. "Harold Thompson?" he asked, though it was obvious he already knew the answer. "That's me. This is my wife Elizabeth and my son Daniel." Gregory greeted everyone politely, but his gaze remained fixed on Harold. "Thank you for coming. I know this can't be easy for you." "For us or for you?" Elizabeth asked with a slightly defensive tone. "For all of us, Mum. This story has hurt a lot of people." Gregory indicated the benches, and everyone sat down. He continued to hold the envelope as if he didn't know how to begin. "Harold, Catherine made me promise that I would give you this letter personally. She spent the last months of her life writing and rewriting it until she was satisfied with what she wanted to tell you." How did she die?" Harold asked, his voice choked. "It was peaceful. She was 70, had heart problems. She passed away in her sleep, without suffering." "Did she marry? Have children?" Gregory smiled sadly. "That is one of the things she wanted you to know." He handed the envelope to Harold, who held it with trembling hands. "Gregory, before I read this, I want you to know that I have regretted every day of my life what I did to your sister. If I could turn back time—" "Harold, read the letter, then we'll talk." With visibly trembling hands, Harold opened the envelope and took out several sheets of paper written by hand in careful script. "My dear Harold, if you are reading this letter, it is because you have finally found the courage to face the past. I confess I don't know whether I should be happy or sad about that. First, I want you to know that I am not writing to hurt you or to seek some belated revenge. At 70 years old, I learned that life is too short to waste on resentment. I want you to know what happened to me after you left, because I think you have the right to know the consequences of your choices. When you didn't show up at the church on our wedding day, I thought it was a mistake. I waited for 3 hours with everyone looking at me with pity. It was the greatest humiliation of my life. In the following months, I tried to find you. I went to your house, looked for your friends, asked everyone. No one knew where you were. It was as if you had vanished from the world. It took me almost a year to accept that you had really abandoned me. A year of crying every night, wondering what I had done wrong, what could have been different. Harold, I want you to know that I never married. Not out of pride or stubbornness, but because I could never trust another man after what you did to me. You broke something inside me that never got fixed. I lived a good life, don't get me wrong. I had a career I'm proud of, I traveled, I made wonderful friends, but always alone. Always with a piece of my heart missing. I didn't have children, Harold. I always dreamed of having a family with you, and when that became impossible, I could never imagine having one with someone else. I know through mutual acquaintances that you married and were happy. I'm genuinely glad for that. At least one of us managed to move on. I'm not writing this to blame you. Everyone makes their choices in life, and I made mine too. I could have fought harder to find you. I could have forced myself to love another man. I didn't. I'm writing because I want you to know that, in spite of everything, I never stopped loving you. This isn't an old woman's romanticism, it's just the truth. You were the love of my life, Harold, the one true love of my life, and I want you to know that if I could go back in time, I would do it all again. All the happy moments we lived together were worth the pain that came after. I hope you were happy with your family. I hope you were a good husband and a good father. I hope you found the peace I never could. If you ever feel like visiting my grave, I am buried at Holy Cross Cemetery here in our town. There's a bed of white roses like the ones you gave me when we first started dating. Go in peace, my love. Finally, go in peace. With eternal love, Catherine. Harold finished reading the letter with tears streaming down his face. Elizabeth and Daniel were also crying, moved by Catherine's pain and generosity. Gregory observed everything in respectful silence. She forgave me? Harold asked between sobs. Catherine was always like that, Gregory replied. Generous to the end. But Harold, I need to tell you something she didn't put in the letter. What? My sister tried. She tried to take her own life twice in the first few years after you left. The pain was almost unbearable for her. The revelation hit Harold like a hammer. Elizabeth held her husband's hand, feeling his pain, despite all her own hurt. She got better with time, Gregory continued, but she was never the same person as before. You took a part of Catherine with you that she never got back. Gregory, I don't know what to say. I don't know how to ask forgiveness for something like that. You don't need to ask me for forgiveness, Harold. You need to ask her. And from what I understand of the letter, she has already forgiven you. Daniel, who had been quiet until then, finally spoke. Mr. Gregory, why did Catherine never look for my father after she found out where he lived? Because she had pride, son, and because she didn't want to destroy the family he had built. Catherine was always like that. She thought of others before herself. She knew I was married? Harold asked. She knew. She knew you had a wife and children, that you seemed happy. That's why he never looked, but he always wanted you to know that she forgave you. Elizabeth, who had listened to everything in silence, finally spoke up. Gregory, I want you to know that I knew nothing of this when I met Harold. If I had known, Mrs. Elizabeth, it wasn't your fault. My sister always made that very clear. The fault was with the man who chose to run away instead of facing the situation like a real man. Gregory's words were harsh, but fair. Harold accepted them without argument, because he knew he deserved them. Can I visit her grave? Harold asked. Of course. She would be happy to know you went. Gregory stood up, indicating the conversation had come to an end. Harold, I've said what I had to say and delivered what I had to deliver. Catherine is at peace now. I hope you can also find yours. He politely said goodbye to the family and walked away, leaving the three of them alone in the little square with the weight of all that revelation. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like the video and especially to subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out, now continuing. The way back home was covered in absolute silence. Each was lost in their own thoughts, processing everything they had discovered. Harold drove automatically, his mind completely focused on Catherine's letter. When they got home, they found a few neighbors still curious about the hole in the backyard. Mrs. Margaret approached as soon as she saw them getting out of the car. So, Harold, did you find what you were looking for? I did, Mrs. Margaret. I did. The definitive tone in the man's voice made the neighbor understand it was not the time for questions. She walked away, leaving the family in peace. Inside the house, Harold went straight to the living room, where he had left the box with Catherine's mementos. He picked up one of the photographs and stared at the young face of the woman he had loved and destroyed. "Dad, what are you going to do now?" Daniel asked. "I'm going to visit her grave. I need to say a proper goodbye. And then? Then I'll try to live with what I know now." Elizabeth sat down beside her husband and took the photograph from his hands. She was very beautiful. She was. And she was good. "Too good for me. Harold, I need to ask you a question, and I want you to be honest with me." The man looked at his wife, preparing for what was to come. "Did you marry me for love or for convenience?" The question Elizabeth had avoided asking all afternoon finally came out. Harold took a long time to answer, choosing his words carefully. "Elizabeth, when I met you, I thought I was in love. You were different from Catherine, more independent, more decisive. I was attracted to that. But was it love? It was attraction, passion, a desire to start a new life. Love. Love, I don't know if I understood what it was back then. And now, 42 years later?" Harold took his wife's hands and held them firmly. "Now I know I grew to love you, Elizabeth. It wasn't love at first sight like it was with Catherine, but it was a love that was built, solid, true. You taught me to be a better man than I was. Even knowing our marriage began with a terrible betrayal. Especially knowing that. Because you accepted me without knowing my past, you gave me a second chance without even knowing you were doing it." Elizabeth was silent for a long time, wrestling with conflicting feelings. Part of her wanted to forgive her husband, but another part felt betrayed by the omission of decades. "Harold, I need time to process all of this. I can't just pretend everything is okay." "I understand, Elizabeth. Take all the time you need. Maybe it's best if I stay at my sister's house for a few days." The wife's suggestion hit Harold like a punch in the stomach, but he knew she was right. "If that's what you think is best..." "Yes. I need to think far from here, far from you, far from these photographs." Daniel tried to intervene. "Mum, maybe it's not necessary for you to leave the house." "Yes, it is, son. 42 years of lies aren't forgiven overnight, if they can be forgiven at all." His mother's words left Daniel worried. Was it possible his parents would separate after so long together? "Dad, aren't you going to try to convince Mom to stay?" "No, son. Your mother has every right to feel betrayed. I lied to her for decades." "But you had your reasons." "No, Daniel. There was no reason that justifies what I did, with Catherine or with your mother." Elizabeth went up to the bedroom and began packing a small suitcase. Harold stayed in the living room with his son, both looking at the photographs scattered on the table. "Dad, do you think Mom will be able to forgive?" "I don't know, son. And if she can't, I'll understand." "But you love each other." "Sometimes love isn't enough to heal certain wounds, Daniel." When Elizabeth came down with the suitcase, Harold stood up to help her. "When are you coming back?" "I don't know. Maybe by the end of the week. Maybe it'll take longer." "Elizabeth, I want you to know that I'm so very sorry I lied to you all these years. If I could change that..." "But you can't, Harold, and that's what we have to live with now." Elizabeth said goodbye to her son with a kiss and left the house without looking back. Harold stood still in the doorway, watching the woman with whom he had built an entire life walk away because of past mistakes. "Dad, do you want me to stay here today?" "You don't need to, son. I really need to be alone." "Are you sure?" "I am. Go home, take care of your family." "And Daniel..." "Yes?" "Learn from my mistakes. Never lie to Jennifer. Never hide anything from her. It's not worth it." Daniel hugged his father and left, leaving Harold alone in the house that suddenly seemed enormous and empty. That night, Harold couldn't sleep. He stayed in the living room looking at the photographs and rereading Catherine's letter. With every word, he felt the weight of guilt grow. How had he been capable of causing so much suffering to someone who loved him so much? The next morning, Harold woke up early and made a decision. He would visit Catherine's grave that same day. He couldn't postpone any longer the meeting that should have happened decades ago. The trip to Catherine's hometown took 2 hours. Harold drove slowly, lost in memories. He recognized some places along the way. The road he used to take to visit her, the gas station where he always stopped to buy flowers. Holy Cross Cemetery was small and well kept. Harold asked the caretaker where Catherine Sullivan's grave was and was directed to a newer area of the cemetery. When he saw the bed of white roses, Harold felt his legs weaken. There she was, the woman he had loved and abandoned, resting in peace under a clear blue sky. The headstone was simple, just the name, the dates of birth and death, and a phrase, "Here rests one who knew how to love without limits." Harold knelt before the grave and finally released all the tears he had held back for 50 years. "Catherine, my dear Catherine, forgive me. Forgive me for being a coward. Forgive me for running away. Forgive me for destroying your life." He stayed there for hours, talking to Catherine as if she could hear him. He told her about his life, about Elizabeth and Daniel, about the regret he had carried since the day he abandoned her. "You deserved so much more than me, Catherine. You deserved a man who loved you without fear, who had the courage to face problems together with you. Forgive me for not being that man." When he finally stood up, Harold felt he had left a part of his burden in that place. He wasn't free from guilt, he never would be, but at least he had managed to say a proper goodbye. On the way back to Woodstock, Harold stopped at a flower shop and bought a bouquet of white roses to place on Catherine's grave on his next visit, because he knew he would return, not to torture himself, but to honor the memory of the woman who had been generous enough to forgive him. When he arrived home in the late afternoon, he found Daniel waiting for him in the living room. "How was it, Dad?" "It was necessary." "Do you feel better?" "Not better, but more at peace. Catherine deserved that I went there." "Did you talk to Mom today?" "No, I'm going to give her the space she asked for." "Dad, can I ask you a personal question?" "Of course, son." "Do you still love Catherine?" Harold thought carefully before answering. "Daniel, the love I felt for Catherine was the first love of my life. That kind of love never completely disappears, it just transforms. Today, I love the memory of what we lived together, and I eternally regret having destroyed it." "And Mom?" "Your mother I love as my life partner, as the mother of my children, as the woman who supported me through all the difficult times. They are different kinds of love, but both are true. Will Mom understand that?" "I don't know, son. Your mother is an intelligent and generous woman, but she was deeply hurt by this revelation. I can only hope and pray that she finds a way to forgive me." The following days passed slowly. Harold returned to his work routine, but his mind was always divided between worry for Elizabeth and memories of Catherine. Daniel visited his father every day, concerned about his emotional state. On the 4th day, Elizabeth called. "Harold, I need to talk to you." "Of course, Elizabeth. Do you want me to come over?" "No, I'll come to the house tonight." Harold's heart raced. His wife's tone revealed nothing about her intentions. At 8 in the evening, Elizabeth arrived. She was thinner and had dark circles under her eyes, signs that she hadn't slept well in recent days. Harold greeted her at the door with a mix of hope and fear. "How are you?" "Tired, Harold. Very tired." They sat in the living room, in the same spot where everything had been revealed. "I've thought a lot about everything that happened, about our life together, about Catherine. And have you reached any conclusion?" Elizabeth took her time to answer, choosing her words carefully. "Harold, what you did to that woman was terrible. Unforgivable, actually." The man's heart sank. "But," Elizabeth continued, "I can't pretend the last 42 years didn't happen. I can't erase our life together because of mistakes you made before you knew me." Harold felt a glimmer of hope. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I want to try to rebuild our life, but on one condition." "What?" "No more lies between us. No more omissions. If there is anything else from your past that I should know, tell me now." "There is nothing else, Elizabeth. Catherine was the only secret I kept from you." "Are you sure?" "Absolutely. You know my whole life since we got married, and now you know what happened before, too." Elizabeth nodded, seeming slightly relieved. "Harold, I don't know if I'll ever be able to completely forget this story. Maybe it will always be here between us. I understand, Elizabeth, but I am willing to try. 42 years of shared life deserve a second chance." Harold stood up and hugged his wife, feeling as if a gigantic weight had been lifted from his shoulders. "Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. Don't thank me yet. It will take time and a lot of work to rebuild trust. I will do whatever is necessary. And, Harold—" "Yes? I want to go with you the next time you visit Catherine's grave." The statement surprised Harold. "You want to go?" "I do. I think I need to know more about the woman you loved before me. I need to make peace with that part of your life." "Are you sure?" "I am. She was part of your story, and your story is part of who you are today. If we are to move forward together, I need to accept that." In the days that followed, the Thompson family's life gradually returned to normal. Elizabeth returned home, but things were different. There was a new honesty between the couple, an openness that hadn't existed before. Harold told Elizabeth all the memories he had of Catherine, all the places they used to go together, all the plans they made for the future. Elizabeth listened to everything carefully, trying to understand the scope of her husband's previous relationship. "Did you love her more than you love me?" she asked one night. "It was a different love, Elizabeth. With Catherine, it was the passion of youth, first love, everything very intense. With you, it's mature love, built over the years, based on companionship and mutual understanding. But which one is stronger? I don't know if it's a question of strength. They're just different. Catherine was part of my past. You are my present and my future." Harold's answer seemed to reassure Elizabeth, who began to open up more about her own feelings. "You know, Harold, when I learned the story, my first reaction was jealousy. Jealousy of a dead woman, can you believe it? It's understandable. Then came anger. Anger at having lived all these years without knowing this part of you. And now I feel compassion. Compassion for her, who suffered so much. And compassion for you, who carried this guilt for so many years. I don't deserve your compassion, Elizabeth. Perhaps not. But it's what I feel." Daniel watched his parents with relief. The family had been through a serious crisis, but seemed to be growing stronger through it. The brutal honesty, though painful, was bringing his parents closer in a way he had never seen before. "Dad, can I ask you a question?" "Of course, son. Do you regret having told everything? Wouldn't it have been easier to take that secret to the grave?" Harold reflected on the question before answering. "Son, carrying that secret was a torment for 50 years. Every day I thought of Catherine, of the suffering I caused, of the cowardice I showed. It wasn't living." "But you almost lost Mom because of it." "Almost. But if I had lost her, it would have been because of the truth, not a lie. I'd rather lose your mother by being honest than keep her by my side based on an omission. And if she hadn't forgiven you, then I would have had to learn to live with the consequences of my choices, but at least I would live in peace with myself." His father's answer impressed Daniel. He saw in him an emotional maturity that only comes with much pain and reflection. 2 weeks after the revelation, Harold and Elizabeth made the trip to Holy Cross Cemetery. Elizabeth carried a bouquet of yellow flowers, daisies, which were always her favorite. When they arrived at Catherine's grave, Elizabeth stood for a long time looking at the headstone. Harold respected his wife's silence, giving her the time she needed. "She was really beautiful," Elizabeth finally said, looking at the small photo on the headstone. "She was. And she seems to have been a good person. The best person I ever knew in my life." Elizabeth placed her daisies next to Harold's white roses. "Catherine, my name is Elizabeth. I'm the woman who married your Harold. I came here to thank you." Harold looked at his wife, surprised. "Thank you?" "Yes, for forgiving him, for being generous enough to wish him happiness, even after all the suffering he caused you. Elizabeth knelt before the grave and continued, Catherine, I want you to know that I took good care of him, that he was a good husband, a good father, an honorable man. I know that doesn't erase what he did to you, but perhaps it brings you some comfort to know he became a better person. Harold was moved by his wife's words. He saw in them a generosity that mirrored Catherine's own generosity. And I promised to keep taking care of him. Not because you asked, but because that's what people who love each other do for one another. When they got up to leave, Elizabeth took Harold's hand. Thank you for bringing me here. Thank you for coming. Now I understand better why you loved her so much, and I understand why she managed to forgive you. On the way back, Elizabeth made a suggestion that surprised Harold. I want us to come here every year, on the anniversary of her death. You want to? I do. Catherine was part of your life, and now she's part of our story too. I think it's right to honor her memory. Elizabeth, how can you be so generous? I learned from a wise woman that resentment only hurts the one who carries it. I prefer to choose forgiveness. Harold squeezed his wife's hand, moved by her ability to turn pain into understanding. The following months were a time of rebuilding for the Thompson family. Harold and Elizabeth began a sort of second courtship, discovering aspects of each other that had remained hidden during decades of marriage. Elizabeth discovered her husband was more sensitive and emotional than she had imagined. Harold realized his wife was stronger and more understanding than he had ever known. You know, Elizabeth, sometimes I think we needed to go through this crisis to truly know each other. Maybe, but I wish we had discovered it without so much suffering. Me too, but we can't change the past. No, we can only build a better future. Daniel watched his parents' transformation with admiration. The crisis had shaken the family, but it had also strengthened the bonds between them. There was more honesty, more dialogue, more affection shown. Mom, can I tell you something? Of course, son. You look more beautiful now. What do you mean? I can't explain it. You seem more free, like you've taken a weight off your shoulders. Elizabeth smiled. Her son had picked up on something she herself was feeling. I think that's it, Daniel. Living with half-truths is exhausting, even when we don't realize it. And Dad? Your father is at peace for the first time in 50 years. I see it in his eyes. It was true. Harold had regained a lightness the family hadn't seen in a long time. That shadow of sadness that always accompanied his gaze was gone. On the first anniversary of Catherine's death, the entire Thompson family went to Holy Cross Cemetery. Daniel wanted to see the grave of the woman who had marked his father's life so deeply. Dad, how do you feel coming back here? At peace, son. For the first time. At peace. And you don't feel guilty anymore? I do, I always will, but I've learned to live with it in a healthier way. How? By honoring Catherine's memory, by being a better man than I was with her, by treating your mother with all the love and respect she deserves. Do you think Catherine would be happy knowing you've found peace? Harold looked at the grave covered in fresh flowers and smiled. Knowing Catherine as I did, I'm sure she would. Elizabeth approached and put her arm around her husband's waist. Catherine, I brought my whole family to meet you today. I wanted you to know you are remembered with affection and respect in our home. Daniel was touched by his mother's gesture. He saw in her a wisdom that only years of life and much suffering could teach. Mum, you are an amazing person. No, son. I'm just a woman who learned that life is too short to waste on bitterness. When they returned to Woodstock that day, Harold made an important decision. Elizabeth, I want to fill in that hole in the backyard. Why? Because I don't need it anymore. What was buried has been unearthed. What needed to be discovered has been discovered. Now it's time to plant something new there. What do you want to plant? How about a tree? A tree that will grow and provide shade for our grandchildren. Our grandchildren. Daniel is thinking of asking Jennifer to marry him. Wouldn't it be nice to have a beautiful tree in the backyard for them to play under? Elizabeth smiled. The idea of focusing on the future instead of being stuck in the past was exactly what she needed at that moment. A tree would be perfect. The following Saturday, the whole family gathered to fill the hole and plant a small mango tree. Daniel brought Jennifer, who already knew the whole story and admired the way the family had handled the crisis. "Mr. Harold, may I ask you a question?" Jennifer said as they helped plant the tree. "Of course, my dear. Do you think you did the right thing by telling the whole truth to the family?" "Jennifer, the truth sometimes hurts, but a lie always destroys. I prefer an honest pain to a false happiness, even knowing you could have lost everything." "Even so, because if I had lost everything based on the truth, I would have lost with dignity, and if I had kept everything based on a lie, it wouldn't truly be mine." Harold's answer impressed the young woman who was about to become part of that family. "Daniel is very lucky to have a father like you." "No, Jennifer, I am very lucky to have a family that was able to forgive me." When they finished planting the mango tree, everyone stood admiring the transformed backyard. Where there had once been a hole full of secrets, now there was a small tree full of promises. "Dad, in a few years, this tree will be big and full of mangoes." "Yes, son, and maybe our grandchildren will play under it. Do you think they'll ask why we planted it here? If they ask, we'll tell them the truth, that we planted it to remember that it's always possible to start over." Elizabeth hugged her husband, looking at the small mango tree with hope. "Harold, do you think Catherine would approve?" "I think so, Elizabeth. I think she would be happy to know that something beautiful was born from the place where there was pain." The sun was setting as they finished the work. The Thompson family took one last look at the transformed backyard before going inside. "Dad, can I tell you something?" Daniel asked. "Of course." "You have become my hero." "Your hero? After everything I did?" "Exactly because of everything you did. Not for the mistake, but for the courage to face it, for the honesty to tell the truth, for the humility to ask for forgiveness." Harold was moved by his son's words. "Daniel, the only heroism that exists is the ability to recognize our mistakes and try to be a better person because of them. That's what you did. That's what all of us can do, son." That night, for the first time in 50 years, Harold Thompson truly slept in peace. There were no more hidden secrets, no more lies between him and the people he loved. In the bed beside him, Elizabeth also slept peacefully. She had chosen forgiveness over resentment, building over destruction, the future over the past. And in the backyard of the simple house in Woodstock, a small mango tree began to take root in the soil that had once held only pain and regret. Dear listener, if you are enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we are just starting out, now continuing. 6 months later, Daniel and Jennifer announced their engagement. The ceremony would be simple, at the neighborhood church, followed by a party in the backyard of the groom's parents' house. "Dad, I want you to be my best man." "Daniel, are you sure? After everything that happened?" "I am absolutely sure. You taught me that a real man is not one who never makes mistakes, but one who has the courage to face them." "Son, it will be an honor to be your best man." "And Dad, I want to have the wedding here under the mango tree." "Here in the backyard?" "Yes. I want our union to be blessed in the place where our family learned that love is stronger than any past mistake." The idea moved the whole family. The small mango tree, which had grown a bit taller, would be the silent witness to a new beginning. In the wedding preparations, Elizabeth suggested something that surprised everyone. "Harold, I think we should invite Gregory to the wedding." "Gregory Sullivan?" "Yes. He was generous to us. He brought us Catherine's letter. I think it would be fair to include him in our happiness." "You want to invite him?" "I do. Catherine was part of your life. Gregory is the only connection we have to her. It would be a way to honor her memory." Harold was touched by his wife's suggestion. He called Gregory, who accepted the invitation with emotion. "Harold, I'm very happy to see that your family has overcome this ordeal." "Gregory, I wanted to thank you again for bringing Catherine's letter." "You don't need to thank me. My sister would be happy to know she caused something good in your life after so much suffering." "She was always like that, wasn't she? Generous. Always. Even in the most difficult moments, Catherine thought of others first. "Gregory, can I ask you a personal question?" "Of course." "Have you managed to forgive me for what I did to your sister?" Gregory took a moment to respond. "Harold, forgiveness isn't something you achieve overnight. It's a process. But seeing how you sincerely regretted, how your family handled the truth, how you honored Catherine's memory, yes, I think I have." "Thank you, Gregory. That means a lot to me." "Harold, can I give you some advice?" "Of course. Stop punishing yourself for the past. Catherine forgave you, your family forgave you. Now you need to forgive yourself." Gregory's words echoed in Harold's mind in the following days. It was true. Even after all the revelation, all the honesty, he still carried a guilt that perhaps was no longer necessary. "Elizabeth, Gregory told me something I can't get out of my head." "What was it?" "That I need to learn to forgive myself." "He's right. But how? How do I forgive myself for causing so much suffering?" Elizabeth took her husband's hands and looked into his eyes. "Harold, you were a frightened young man who made terrible decisions. But you are no longer that young man. You became an honorable man, who owned up to his mistakes, who asked for forgiveness, who changed. But the suffering I caused, it can't be undone, but it can be transformed into something positive." Catherine found peace at the end of her life. Our family grew stronger through the truth. Daniel learned valuable lessons about honesty and courage. "Do you think it's possible to turn suffering into something good?" "I'm sure. Look at us. We are closer today than we were before we knew about Catherine." Harold reflected on his wife's words. Perhaps it was really time to stop punishing himself and start living fully the life he had built. The day of Daniel's wedding arrived sunny and beautiful. The small ceremony was set up in the backyard, with the mango tree decorated with white flowers, a subtle tribute to Catherine. Gregory arrived with a special gift, a framed photograph of a young Catherine smiling. "I thought you might like to have this. It's one of the few remaining photos of her truly happy." Elizabeth received the photograph affectionately. "We'll put it in the living room, alongside our family photos. Catherine will always be remembered here." During the ceremony, Daniel spoke about the importance of honesty in marriage, inspired by his parents' experience. His words moved everyone present, especially Harold. "Jennifer, I promise you that I will never hide anything, never lie, never run away from problems. I learned from my father that the truth, no matter how painful, is always better than the most comfortable lie." When the young couple kissed under the mango tree, Harold felt the circle had closed. The tree planted in place of the Hole of Secrets now blessed a new love built on honesty. "Dad, are you crying?" Daniel asked after the ceremony. "I am, son. But these are tears of happiness." "Why?" "Because I saw you choosing to start your married life the right way, with truth, honesty, courage. I learned from the best teacher. No, Daniel, I learned from my mistakes, and I'm happy they served to teach you something." The party continued late into the night. Gregory integrated perfectly with the family, telling stories about Catherine that shed more light on the woman who had marked Harold's life so deeply. "Did she like to cook?" Elizabeth asked, genuinely interested. "She loved it. She made the best chocolate cake I've ever tasted, and she always cooked for others, never just for herself. Always thinking of others. Always. Sometimes even too much. I always told her to think more of herself, but she couldn't." Harold listened to the stories with a nostalgic smile. It was good to know more about Catherine, to fill the gaps he had left by abandoning her. "Gregory, can I ask you something?" Daniel interrupted. "Of course. How did you find out where my father lived?" "It was by chance, actually. A family friend was passing through Woodstock and saw your father on the street, recognized him right away." "And did Catherine want to look for him?" "Not immediately. She spent weeks deciding whether she should or not. In the end, she chose to write the letter, but only to be delivered after her death." "Why?" "Because she didn't want to cause problems for your family. Always thinking of others, like I said." Elizabeth was moved once again by Catherine's generosity, even after so much time. When the party ended and Gregory left, promising to keep in touch, the family was alone in the backyard under the stars. It was a perfect day, Elizabeth said. It was, Harold agreed. And do you know what makes me happiest? What? Asked Daniel and Jennifer. That all of this happened here, in this place where before there were only secrets and pain. Now there is love, unity, honesty. Dad, do you think Catherine is seeing all of this from where she is? Harold looked at the mango tree, now with abundant leaves swaying in the night breeze. Son, I don't know if I believe in those things, but if she is watching, I'm sure she's happy. Why? Because Catherine always wanted people to be happy, and today, finally, we all are. The following years brought many changes for the Thompson family. Daniel and Jennifer had 2 children, Matthew and Emma, who grew up playing in the shade of the mango tree that had become lush and generous. Harold became a devoted grandfather, but he always told his grandchildren the story of the tree growing in the backyard. Grandpa, why did you plant the mango tree here? Asked 5-year-old Matthew. Because we wanted something beautiful to grow where there was sadness before. But why was there sadness here? Because Grandpa did a very ugly thing to a young lady when he was young. And when he grew up, he wanted to apologize to her. And did she forgive Grandpa? She did, my dear, and that's why we planted the tree, to remember that we can always plant good things in the places where we did bad things. The children didn't fully understand the depth of the story, but they absorbed the lesson about forgiveness and new beginnings. Elizabeth became a loving and wise grandmother, always available to talk to her grandchildren about anything. Her experience with the revelation about Catherine had made her more understanding and patient. Grandma, was Grandpa dating another girl before you? Emma asked one day. Yes, he was, dear. Were you jealous? I was, very jealous. And now? Not now. I learned that Grandpa's heart has room for many different loves. The love he had for her doesn't diminish the love he has for me. And was she beautiful? Very beautiful. And very kind, too. Elizabeth picked up the photograph of Catherine that stayed in the living room and showed it to her granddaughter. Her name is Catherine, and even without ever having met me, she taught me one of the most important lessons of my life. What lesson? That forgiving isn't forgetting what happened. It's choosing not to let what happened ruin what can still be good. Elizabeth's simple words held a profound wisdom that only those who have endured great trials can develop. Gregory became a dear friend of the family, visiting them at least twice a year. He always brought new stories about Catherine and about other members of the Sullivan family. Gregory, can I ask you a question that has always intrigued me? Harold asked during one of his visits. Of course. Did you ever feel anger toward me? A lot of anger, Harold. For years. And what changed? Seeing that you truly regretted it, seeing that you became a better man, and most of all, seeing that you honored Catherine's memory the way she deserved. How so? Catherine always believed that people could change, that they could become better. Seeing you prove that was a way of validating the faith she had in humanity. Was she that optimistic? Always, even in the most difficult moments. She always believed things could get better. Harold was moved, remembering that characteristic of Catherine. That's what he missed most about her, her ability to find hope in any situation. On the 10th anniversary of the revelation, the family decided to have a special celebration, not to commemorate the pain of the past, but to celebrate the transformation it had brought. Dad, when you look back, do you regret having told the truth? Daniel asked. Never, son. It was the best decision I ever made. Even knowing you almost lost Mom? Even so. Because I learned that a life based on a lie isn't a real life. And if you could go back in time, if I could go back in time, I wouldn't have abandoned Catherine at the altar. But since I can't, I thank God every day for having had the courage to tell you the truth. Elizabeth, who was listening to the conversation from the kitchen, joined the family in the living room. Harold, can I tell you something? Of course. These 10 years have been the best years of our marriage. Why? Because they were the only ones in which we lived in complete truth, without secrets, without omissions, without half-truths. Do you feel better this way? Much better. Getting to know Catherine, even through stories and memories, helped me understand you better. and understanding you made me love you more." Elizabeth's words still had the power to move Harold after so many years. "Elizabeth, how can you be so wise?" "I'm not wise, Harold. I just learned that life is too precious to waste on resentment. And where did you get the strength to forgive?" "From Catherine. Her letter taught me that some people are capable of loving without limits, even when they are hurt. I wanted to be a person like that too." Daniel watched his parents with admiration. 10 years after the biggest crisis of their lives, they were more united than ever. "Dad, Mum, you know you're an example for me and Jennifer, right?" "How so?" Elizabeth asked. "You taught us that marriage isn't about never having problems. It's about how you face problems together. And about being honest, always," added Jennifer, who had arrived with the children. "Grandpa, Grandma, can you tell the story of the mango tree again?" asked Matthew. "Of course, my dear. But today Grandma is going to tell it." Elizabeth sat with her grandchildren on her lap and began the story they had heard many times but never grew tired of hearing. Once upon a time there was a man who kept a secret in his heart for many, many years. While Elizabeth was telling the story to the children, Harold went out to the backyard and stood looking at the mango tree. The tree was now tall and lush, with branches that offered generous shade. "Catherine, thank you," he whispered to the starry night. "Thank you for forgiving me. Thank you for teaching me, even after all this time, what it truly means to love." A gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the mango tree, as if it were a silent reply. Harold smiled and went back inside, to be with the family that had chosen truth over lies, forgiveness over resentment, love over hurt. In the living room, Elizabeth was finishing the story for her grandchildren. "And the lady forgave Grandpa?" Emma asked. "She did, my dear, because she had a very big heart and knew that forgiving is good for the one who forgives too." "And you lived happily ever after?" "We are happy today, sweetheart. And we try to be happy tomorrow too. Happiness isn't forever, it's for now." "And the mango tree?" "The mango tree will keep growing, giving shade and bearing fruit, to remind us that it's always possible for something good to grow where once there was something sad." When the children went to bed, the adults stayed in the living room talking about life, about plans for the future, about the lessons they had learned. "Dad, if someone asked you what the most important moment of your life was, what would you say?" Daniel asked. Harold thought for a long time before answering. "It wouldn't be just one moment, son. It would be 3 moments." "Which ones?" "The first was when I met Catherine and learned what it was to truly love. The second was when I met your mother and learned what it was to build a life with someone. And the third was when I had the courage to tell you all the truth and learned what it was to be free. And if you had to choose just one?" "The third, because it was the only one that truly depended on my courage. The other 2 were luck chance encounters, but choosing the truth was a conscious decision to be a better person." "I'm very proud of you, Dad. And I am very proud of you, of all of you." Elizabeth took her husband's hand and squeezed it affectionately. "Harold, you know what amazes me most about this whole story?" "What?" "That Catherine managed to give us a lesson in love even after she was gone. Through that letter, she taught our whole family about forgiveness, generosity, and unconditional love. It's true. She was always my teacher, even when I didn't realize it. And she always will be. Some people mark our lives forever, even when they are no longer here. Catherine did that for me, and you did too, Elizabeth, and Daniel did. All of you did." "Dad, can I give you some advice?" Daniel said. "Of course, son. Stop feeling guilty. Catherine forgave you, we forgave you. Now you need to forgive yourself too." "I'm trying, Daniel. Don't try, do it. You deserve to be completely happy." "Your son is right," Elizabeth added. "You've already paid for your mistakes. You've already repented enough. Now it's time to live." Harold looked at the family gathered in the living room and felt a deep peace. Maybe it really was time to stop punishing himself and start fully living the happiness he had built. "You're right. Enough guilt. Starting today, I'm going to focus on being grateful for all the good that has happened in my life." "And there has been a lot of good," Elizabeth said. "A lot. You, the grandchildren, this house, this family. Catherine taught me to love, you taught me to build, Daniel taught me to have courage. And what did you teach us? Jennifer asked. I hope I taught you that it's never too late to do the right thing, that the truth, no matter how painful, is always worth it. And that true love is stronger than any mistake from the past. That night, when everyone had left and the house fell silent, Harold and Elizabeth sat in the backyard under the mango tree to talk, as they had every night since they had reconciled. Elizabeth, can I ask you a question? Always. Are you happy? Very happy, Harold. And you? Me too. For the first time in 50 years, I am completely happy. What changed? Everything. I learned that I don't need to be perfect to be loved. I learned that the truth sets you free even when it hurts. I learned that forgiveness heals both the one who forgives and the one who is forgiven. And you learned that some trees need to be planted where there were once holes, Elizabeth added, looking at the mango tree. Yes, and that those trees bear the sweetest fruit. They stayed there in silence for a long time, just appreciating the peace they had won through much pain and much work. Harold, thank you. For what? For having the courage to tell me the truth, for giving me the chance to choose to stay or leave knowing all the facts. And thank you for choosing to stay. It wasn't a choice, Harold. It was love. True love doesn't give up at the first difficulty. Catherine taught me that too. Even after I gave up on her, she never gave up on loving me. And now you have 2 examples of true love in your life. I do. And I hope I've managed to repay at least a little of the love I've received. You have. Every day. When they finally went inside to sleep, Harold took one last look at the photograph of Catherine in the living room. It was no longer an image of guilt and regret. It was a memory of true love and infinite forgiveness. Good night, Catherine, he whispered. Thank you for everything. And for the first time in 50 years, Harold Thompson slept without nightmares, without guilt, without regrets. He slept at peace with his past, grateful for his present and hopeful for his future. The next morning he woke to the sound of children playing in the backyard under the mango tree. Matthew was trying to climb the tree while Emma collected the leaves that had fallen. "Good morning, Grandpa," they shouted when they saw him at the window. "Good morning, my loves." "Grandpa, will the mango tree bear fruit soon?" Matthew asked. "Not yet, my boy, but when it does, we'll make sweets for the whole family." And for the lady in the picture too. Harold smiled. The children always included Catherine in their plans, as if she were part of the family. "Yes, Matthew, for her too. But she's not here anymore, Grandpa. She's not my angel, but she's in our hearts. And the people in our hearts are never left out of anything." The grandfather's simple words carried a deep wisdom that the children absorbed without question. Later, when the whole family was gathered for Sunday lunch, Harold made an announcement. "Everyone, I want to tell you something." "What is it, Dad?" Daniel asked. "Last night I made an important decision. I'm going to stop carrying guilt for the past." "That's great, Dad. And I'm going to start a new project." "What project?" Elizabeth asked, curious. "I'm going to write the history of our family, the whole story. My story with Catherine, how I met your mother, how you were born, how we overcame the crisis, everything." "What for?" "For the grandchildren, so they know the complete history of their family. So they learn that it's possible to overcome any difficulty with love and honesty." "Dad, what a wonderful idea," Jennifer exclaimed. "I'll need your help, especially yours, Elizabeth, to remind me of the details I might have forgotten." "Of course, Harold. It will be a pleasure to help. And I want to include memories of Catherine, too. Gregory can help me with that." "Dad, this is going to be a beautiful story," Daniel said. "It will be our story, son, the story of a family that learned that true love overcomes anything." In the following months, Harold dedicated himself to the project with enthusiasm. He would spend hours writing, talking to Elizabeth about details from the past, calling Gregory to learn more about Catherine. "Gregory, can you tell me what Catherine was like as a child?" "She was a curious child, always asking questions, and generous, always sharing her toys with the other children. And as a teenager, a dreamer, always talking about the future, about the plans she had for her adult life." "What plans?" "She wanted to be a teacher, to have many children, to travel the world. Simple dreams, but they meant everything to her. Harold would carefully note everything down, wanting Catherine's story to be complete and fair. "Gregory, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Can you tell me about her funeral? Who was there? What was it like?" It was simple as she would have wanted. Many people from town came. Catherine was loved by everyone. She had helped many families over the years. How did she help people? She gave free tutoring to children in need. She cooked for families going through hard times. She visited elderly people who had no family. Even after all the suffering she went through? Perhaps because of it. Catherine used to say that those who have suffered a lot cannot let others suffer too. The stories about Catherine filled Harold's heart with pride and sadness at the same time. Pride at having been loved by such a special woman. Sadness for having wasted so much time with her. "Harold, can I ask you a question?" Gregory said during one of their conversations. "Of course." "Do you still feel guilty?" "Sometimes. But I'm learning to turn that guilt into gratitude." "How so?" "Gratitude for having known Catherine. Gratitude that she loved me. Gratitude for having learned from her what true love is. I think Catherine would be happy to know that. I hope so." The family book grew, page by page, memory by memory. Harold wrote about the happy moments with Catherine, about how he met Elizabeth, about the birth of Daniel, about the difficulties and joys of family life. But mostly he wrote about the most important lesson he had learned, that the truth, no matter how painful, always sets you free. "Dad, can I read what you've written so far?" Daniel asked one day. "Yes, son. But prepare to be moved." Daniel spent hours reading the manuscript. When he finished, his eyes were red from crying so much. "Dad, this is beautiful. It's the most beautiful story I've ever read. It's our story, Daniel. It's not beautiful because I made it up. It's beautiful because it's true. Are you going to publish it?" "I don't know. Maybe it's just for the family." "Dad, I think you should publish it. A lot of people could be inspired by this story." "You think so?" "I'm sure. How many people live carrying secrets that torture them? How many families could be strengthened through truth?" His son's suggestion made Harold think, perhaps his story really could help other people. "I'll talk to your mother about this. You can count on my support, Dad. I think this story deserves to be known." That night, Harold talked to Elizabeth about the possibility of publishing the book. "Harold, are you sure you want to expose our lives like that?" "Elizabeth, our story is about overcoming, forgiveness, true love. I think it could inspire other people." "And Catherine's memory?" "I think it would be a way to honor her, to show the world what an extraordinary person she was." Elizabeth thought for a long time before answering. "You know, Harold, all these years, we've kept Catherine's story as a family secret. Maybe it's time to share that story with the world. So you agree?" "I agree, but on one condition." "What?" "I want to help write it. The story isn't just yours, it's ours, and the perspective of a woman who learned to live with her husband's past love could be valuable." "Elizabeth, what a wonderful idea." In the following months, Harold and Elizabeth worked together on the book. She added chapters about her perspective on the revelation, about how she learned to forgive, about how she incorporated Catherine into the family history. "Harold, can I tell you something?" "Of course." "Writing about all this made me realize how much we've grown as people." "How so?" "Before the revelation, we were a couple who loved each other, but who had also become complacent. Afterward, we became a couple who chooses to love each other every day." "That's true. The truth forced us to be more present in the relationship. And it made me understand that love is not possession. I can share your heart with Catherine without it diminishing the love you feel for me. Elizabeth, you are an extraordinary woman. I'm not, Harold. I'm a woman who learned that resentment only hurts the one who carries it." The book was finished by the end of the year. Harold and Elizabeth decided to have a small launch party in the backyard, under the mango tree that had inspired the entire family's healing journey. Gregory came especially for the occasion, bringing some of Catherine's personal belongings that he wanted to donate to the family. "Harold, Catherine would have been proud to know her story will inspire other people. Gregory, this book is a tribute to her too. Without Catherine, without her generosity, none of this would have been possible. What will you call the book? The Mango Tree in the Backyard, a story of forgiveness and new beginnings, Elizabeth answered. Perfect. Catherine loved mangoes. Gregory smiled. The small party gathered the whole family and some close friends. Harold read some passages from the book aloud, moving everyone. I want to dedicate this book to 3 people, he said. To Catherine, who taught me what unconditional love is, to Elizabeth, who taught me what true forgiveness is, and to Daniel, who taught me that it's never too late to be brave. And to the grandchildren? Asked Matthew, who at 6 years old already knew it was a special occasion. And to the grandchildren who teach me every day that the future is more important than the past. When everyone had left and the family was alone, they sat under the mango tree for one last conversation of the night. Dad, do you think you succeeded? Daniel asked. Succeeded at what, son? Turning suffering into something good. Harold looked around. He saw the wife who had chosen to stay by his side, the son who admired him, the grandchildren playing happily, the tree that had grown in the place of buried secrets. I think so, Daniel. I think we managed to turn pain into growth, regret into wisdom, guilt into gratitude. And what else did you learn from all this? I learned that we are all fallible, but that doesn't make us less worthy of love. I learned that the truth hurts but lies destroy. I learned that forgiving is a gift we give ourselves. And you learned that planting a mango tree in the right place can change everything, Emma added, making everyone laugh. That's true, my granddaughter. The best things grow in places where there was once sadness. That night, for the last time, Harold looked at the photograph of Catherine before sleeping. Catherine, thank you for forgiving me. Thank you for teaching me to love. Thank you for being part of our story. And finally, Harold Thompson slept completely at peace. There were no more hidden secrets, no more unresolved guilt. There was only love, gratitude, and the certainty that he had done the right thing. In the backyard of the simple house in Woodstock, the mango tree swayed gently in the night breeze, its leaves whispering stories of forgiveness, new beginnings, and love that overcomes any obstacle of time. End of story. So what did you think of this story of overcoming and forgiveness? Harold had the courage to face his past after 50 years, even knowing he could lose everything. Do you think he did the right thing by telling the family the truth? And Elizabeth, was she able to forgive a decades-old secret? Share your thoughts on this touching story in the comments. If you liked it, leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other stories that touch the heart. Your participation is very important to us.